Hello and welcome back to Taking Back Saturday, a Happy Buyers Club podcast where we break down the real estate market each and every Friday to help home buyers build confidence, follow a process and hopefully buy really happy. I'm your host, Chase Jones, and joining me on the appropriate side of the desk is my mate, Sam Hunter. How are you, sir?
Good morning, Chase. Hello, listeners. Very well. I was just thinking to myself as you were doing that introduction, I had the opportunity of doing that intro last week for a guest that'll come out in a few weeks, and I smashed it. Didn't even look at the notes. I channeled my inner Chase Jones, and it was good. I think I could sit on that desk for that side of the desk for one of these shows potentially.
It says the guy that didn't have to edit it.
For sure.
Mate, we are here to timestamp it. It is Tuesday the 6th of May, and public holiday season has come to an end. Maybe thankfully for us in real estate to some extent. It has been a very stop, start last month. And I think those that aren't in real estate, it's so great.
Oh man, anyone with children, it's just like, holy hell, 5 full days of school. We're back, baby.
Sign me up.
Yeah, we all need a break from our families to go to work sometimes. Although I will admit, I enjoyed my Labor Day public holiday more than potentially any of the others.
I agree. I think you just yesterday gone was like, maybe it was because we knew it was the last one. Maybe. And it was just like, that is the last little bit of battery recharge that I need. That's going to get me through to the Ekka.
Yeah, we did 2 parks and 2 bushwalks on our Labor Day. It was epic. And I reckon it was probably also because things like Bunnings and Woolies were shut. So you couldn't have run an errand if you wanted to. So you were just forced to disconnect.
No life admin, just life recharging, and that's it.
For cheesy.
I think what people have been feeling, and this is us included, being that we are in real estate all day, every day, 6 days a week, 7 days a week, is that real estate doesn't stop. The emotions are always there. If you're in buy mode, you're buying.
Yeah.
And public holidays aside, stop, start, stock being held back, that doesn't change the fact that you're buying and you want to buy. And I imagine that on the sell side of things, that a lot of selling agents and sellers alike would have been feeling similar, being like, I don't care that there's a public holiday. I need this sold.
For sure.
I need a result. What a tough period to navigate.
I reckon what would have happened and what would have shown the really top real estate agents from the people who maybe have only been doing it a little while and have only really operated in a very fast, very fluid, very performative market is that they would have had a lot of conversations over the last few weeks of just understanding of I know you want it to be sold and I know you want this to happen and this to happen, but this is the reality. We're doing everything we can. We're continuing to follow the process. There will be results at the end. So it's similar to some of the conversations we've had with our own clients who, we've got a pretty good habit of buying a house within 6 weeks. We've got a couple of clients who are coming up to that mark who've suffered through all of this stop, start nature. And it's been on us to make sure that they know that the work hasn't stopped and the results will come. Some things just take a little bit longer.
No doubt.
High empathy for anyone who's listening to this who's in real estate. You'll know that you've really lent into empathy over the last few weeks. And I think it will pay dividends in the next few weeks. And if you're out there buying, selling, renting, investing, it's the same sort of thing. You've done a lot of market research of stuff that you didn't really like over the last few weeks. And that will pay dividends when the right thing pops up and you're in a position to just buy it rather than think about it.
Because you've built the foundation. You've built the foundation. And if nothing else, you've got experience. You've got more market knowledge. You've got more market experience than those that were like, cool, we'll pick this up again in May. When realistically, there were opportunities to be had. There might have been stock that wasn't super appropriate for guys that we were buying for, and maybe a lot of people are feeling that too. It feels like the market itself has been steady, stock low, but prices steady.
Yeah, definitely. I would say that, we put out a video last week about the sort of April market results and what does that mean for May and into Brisbane winter. I would say that steady is a really rock solid word for it. Fair is a word that we've been using almost probably since November.
Honest.
Yeah, houses are selling for what they're worth. Sometimes what they're worth is a seller and a buyer having a negotiation 1-to-1 and you get a result and everyone's happy and you move on. Sometimes what it's worth is there's still 6 or 7 people really interested. Sometimes there's 16 or 20 people still interested and the property sells for what it's worth. In either of those scenarios, it's very fair, in my opinion. Nothing's really running away. What I will say is there was a little bump in price growth in April that we really haven't seen in the Brisbane market for a few months. I think that is probably because there wasn't a great deal on the market in March and April. And when there's just as many people looking and not as much available, it tends to only do one thing to prices. So I think that's probably the result of a rate cut a few weeks back, people being frustrated that there's nothing on the market, maybe some panic buying, maybe some just actually pretty good properties being sold without a lot of competition around it. One thing that's important for buyers to remember is that when a seller goes to market, they're competing with all the other houses like theirs.
Correct.
And when there's nothing on the market, this is actually a pretty good time to sell because you're the only choice for a particular segment. And we always say this to our clients when we meet them, like think of the market like 10 people. If you can get 10 out of 10 people having a look at your house, you're going to get a better price.
No doubt.
Than if you get 4 out of 10 people looking or 6 out of 10 people looking. And it's our job to be the 1 or 2 out of 10 that sees it first and ideally takes it away from the other 8. Doesn't always happen that way, but I think certainly the low end and the very high end has really driven market growth over the last sort of 6 weeks. And I think that's really representative in April's data. Under 1 million flying, like consistently selling for 5% above probably what it should. Over 2.5, maybe even a bit north of that.
I'd say the 3+, that market
flying.
Will continue to just...
Yep. There seems to be more people with more money than God in Brisbane at the moment, and they all want to buy good houses, and there's enough of them out there to satisfy that need and beyond. In the middle of that, though...
I will say on both those markets, in terms of the low end and the high end, there is an assumption when you speak to those agents that every comparable sale to that this will exceed that. There is an expectation that there is growth based on the competition, the interest. That is just a given. It's like, yes, that one did sell in this same complex 3 months ago for this, which means this is automatically now worth 5% more.
For sure. It's even 2 weeks ago because there's buyers left over who are emotional now about missing out. So their inclination is just to pay a little bit more to not have that experience again.
Same thing at the top end. If you're talking like for like in terms of the quality of product, the level of finish, the location, it's an expectation that like, great, well, this fantastic property on this fantastic street in this fantastic suburb sold for 3.5 last week. So now this one's going to sell for more because we're going to ride that wave off the back of that one. In the middle, though,
it is the opposite of that. It sold for that in October.
We're hoping to get that now.
Probably going to sell for that now. And that is just because people in that middle market, they bought a house 4 or 5 years ago. And again, if you listen to this show regularly, this is not news to you. If you first episode, hello, welcome. Thank you. It's tough going. Like you're paying a lot of bills on top of then selling your house and buying another one, selling for 1.6, buying for 2.2. There's a lot of life that happens in that transaction.
Moving in the middle market has never been harder.
100%. And it's why, if you're doing it, you're going to do it right. And it's probably why, and we're going to do a couple of episodes, or probably one episode about this in the future, about selling and whether you sell before you buy or buy before you sell. Actually, we might put a little Instagram thing out to ask people some questions about what they actually want us to talk about when it comes to selling and then buying. That is a tough move financially. It is a tough move emotionally, and it is a tough move practically. Like if you're selling the family home to buy a bigger family home, you are organizing not just your own lives, but these little weasel lives around you, right? No matter how old they are. And God knows you don't want to do that more than you need to. So you really are thinking about it. And it's why stock's tight, but it's also why prices aren't moving, because people are super wary of spending every dollar they have to buy the perfect forever family home to then run the risk of having to do it all over again and spend even more money. It's like $100,000 in cold hard cash that you're going to put in a fire pit and light on fire when you're selling the family home to buy the bigger family home. There's a reason it's tough. Like people don't have that kind of disposable income to make a decision and then regret it in a year or 2 years' time. So I got a lot of empathy, coming back to talking about empathy at the start of the show. I got a lot of empathy for people who find themselves in that market. That is the hardest market to buy in Brisbane. And I also reckon it's the hardest market to sell in, because you've probably been thinking about selling for a long time and prices have been going nuts for such a long period of time. Now you've made the decision to sell and your expectations are pretty high and the offers probably aren't where they are. And a good agent will be telling you we need to listen to the market, but sometimes it's hard to listen to your good agent because you just think, man, they must just want to get paid. 9 times out of 10, that is the reality. Yeah. Listen to them.
Yeah, and I tell you what, there's probably a lot of agents in that middle market. I've found it more so than we have probably in years or particularly months prior that are electing to go behind auction. Like they're looking at auction as the method of sale to almost let that do the talking.
Oh, for sure.
And, I think that, having had some great auction agents sit in that chair and interview them in the past few months, that's probably a campaign in which requires even more communication. It requires more conversations between, agent and buyer, agent and seller, as well as agent and buyer, to educate them on that process instead of just waiting until it's under the gavel to be like, well,
what do you want to do?
Yeah, here we are.
It's 250 grand less than you want. You want to take it. We had a potential client now, I would say mate of ours, go through that really shitty auction campaign where the only true feedback that he got was the report being we advise you to set a very competitive reserve. The feedback's been nowhere
48 hours prior to the auction.
The feedback's been nowhere near what we discussed when we listed the property and promised the world and said we were going to do a really great job. What do you want to do? And I think quite rightly, they held their ground. They didn't take what was their best option on auction day, and they sold it the first Saturday after with a finance clause for what I feel like is a far more, at least, appropriate price than they got on auction day, but still probably a bit less than they wanted. That's the middle market. That I don't think is a very uncommon story. And there would be sellers probably listening to this who've either just gone through that or are in the midst of going through that now or are thinking about selling, and they're like, fuck, how do we avoid that? Right? Pick a good real estate agent and listen to them.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
And go into it understanding that this is the middle market and it is tough.
Yeah.
But we are coming into selling season. I like to call this Brisbane winter.
Brisbane winter. I don't know if it's quite selling season, but it's my season. It's your season for sure, man. Chase runs hot.
Oh, just let it rain down on me. No, but actually, no. I much prefer the dry weather, and I really like these cool days. But I think what we can expect between now and spring, which is probably more traditionally selling season, in that run into Christmas, is that we will see more stock come to market. Certainly probably not as much as we would expect to see come spring for that run into Christmas. But I think that this is the time where we will start to see stock pick up.
100%. It is dry. The skies are beautiful. They're usually clear. It's very comfortable to go to an open home at 11 a.m., whereas in January, it's not really.
Oh.
If you've been looking to buy a house since Christmas time, you'll have noticed that in summer, there are a lot of open homes wedged between 9 and 10:45 a.m. They'll start to spread out a little bit more because the agents can wear a suit after kind of 9:30 in the morning without dripping sweat through it. It is a really good time, I think, for real estate in Brisbane through the cooler months. I don't know if you could call daytime weather cold in Brisbane at least, but it is pretty much picture perfect. And actually, those blue skies make a big difference in photos when they're selling emotion to get people to open homes. They make a really big difference when you get there on the day and a house without air conditioning on is really comfortable. But also, it's also now really important that when you're walking through a house at 11 o'clock in the morning, it faces west and it's really cool. You pull out your compass and you remind yourself that faces west, and in 6 months' time, that's going to be fucking hot. And just to look past the kind of perfect weather setup for a lot of these houses and make sure that you are still doing all of your checks. And you got that checklist and you're ticking all the boxes. It's a bit like you'll see more properties with flood risk. Thank you, Sam. You will see more properties with flood risk sell in winter than you will in summer. Common sense, my fair listener, is because there's less rain and less moisture in winter than in summer, so there is less chance that someone will go, I should probably check this.
Yeah, and that's the thing. For the last few months, it's been, inspecting the red flags have been planted out the front door.
100%.
You're walking through. You can feel how wet the ground is in parts. You can see where water has pooled. You can see, watermarks against the side of the house where, maybe the groundwater's going the wrong way. And it's, okay, cool. This is a challenge. Am I willing to overcome it? Can we look past this? What's it going to cost to fix it? All that sort of stuff. Because it's hitting you in the face. It's on the building and pest reports. It's there visible to even just Joe Blow that doesn't need to know, everything about groundwater and stormwater and how water needs to get away. But here, finding ourselves in the drier months, it's not going to hit you in the face. There is not going to be red flags, stamped into the guttering systems and stuff like that. So, slow down, know what you're looking for, and put yourself in the shoes of someone who's, got a storm warning alert on their phone and being like, oh, geez, is that my house that's about to get washed away?
Exactly right. I think one of the points I wanted to make, you mentioned Christmas earlier, and I think topically, I was listening to a realestate.com.au podcast. Don't listen to them, just listen to this show. More context, better banter, more, real data about Brisbane. But they did say that in their kind of annual survey that they did of people who used their website last year, it was 44 weeks on average that it took somebody to buy a house in 2024. So basically, if you decided in New Year's Eve 2023 that you were going to buy a house, you'd have just settled in time for Christmas 2024. Your mention of Christmas.
And be like, what a year.
Yeah.
We haven't done anything on a Saturday since last Christmas.
So that's a bit shit. That's a bit yuck.
Yeah. No doubt.
We talk about how you can kind of set yourself up to buy a house in 6 weeks. That's a fuckload better than 44 weeks. Like, that is truly missing a market, particularly when we talk about how important it is, if you are selling and buying, to think about getting a contract on your house first. You're going to have a load of market creep if it's going to take you 44 weeks.
No doubt.
So I think the 2 points I'll make there is, if you actually want to buy a house before Christmas, now's the time to be as organised as possible and to be ruthless in putting the time, effort and energy into it to go and find something, because you don't want it to take you 44 weeks. Maybe it takes longer than 6 weeks, but give yourself the best opportunity to be in way before Christmas and way better than average. I think the second point that I'll make off the back of that is, like, accept that there's no such thing as a perfect home. If 10 buyers make a market, there's not really 10 out of 10 homes. Even a house, had a chat with an agent mate of ours the other day. He just built a house. He paid, looking back on it, a very good price for that house, but when he signed that contract, it was an exorbitant amount of money, such as the world moved on. They have the exact house they want. He has the builder there every weekend fixing stuff still.
Yeah.
There is no such thing as a perfect property. In a market that has the potential to continue to rise, there's not much wrong with a 7 or 8 out of 10.
Yep. You know what that stat says to me about 44 weeks is that there's a lot of people that are browsing for a long time. That they are going at it half gas and not getting the results because they haven't laid the foundations to actually go and buy something. So it is about doing the hard work up front, getting really clear about what a 7 out of 10 looks like. What does a 10 out of 10 look like? But understanding that what we're actually looking for is probably somewhere in the middle. And then going about working out if that property actually exists, getting onto the agents, start harassing them now in the expectation that it could take you from now until Christmas to find that sweet spot right there, 7 out of 10. There's probably not a 10 out of 10 out there, a 9 out of 10. But that's the difference. That's what's stopping people from buying in 6 weeks as opposed to 44.
For sure.
Is that they're not doing the work ahead of time.
I think
the pre-weeks.
Accepting compromise is a really important part of a good real estate decision. We talked about that triangle of, like, quality of property, quality of area, budget.
Yeah.
Pick two, right?
Yeah.
You don't necessarily have to pick two, but you have to be willing to understand exactly where the compromise sits across each of those, right? And the key word there is accepting it, because once you can accept it, then you can walk in and be like, that's not a compromise I'm willing to make. You just move on. And it saves you heaps of time. Will get you into your next home, your next property, way ahead of this 44-week average.
Nice.
No wonder their traffic numbers are so high. 44 weeks, Jesus.
They just hook you in.
Don't they?
It's like, hey, do you want a couple of emails every day?
At 6 o'clock, right when you want to, like, bath your children.
It's like, hey, you thought real estate was done for the day. It's not. I'm going to send you a few emails just to keep you hooked. Interest
Speaking
rates.
of hooked, yeah.
Interest rates. RBA meeting again end of this month?
20th of May.
Yeah.
All signs point towards a rate cut. I think that's been pretty well priced in by every major, minor and in-between lender in Australia. We would be one of the few sort of developed nations in the world not to have had multiple rate cuts by now. So I think it's probably, certainly, almost definitely going to happen on the 20th of May.
Jeez, that's a hell of an asterisk, my friend.
Isn't it? I was having a look at some National Australia Bank economist comments earlier today, which is what sort of spurred this podcast dot point on. And their chief economist is bullish. I'm going to say bullish. Because she's predicting that there'll be a 0.5% cut in May and then another 0.25% cut in July, August, November and Feb. So that's a 1.5% reduction in interest rates from where they are today in early May to potentially where they'll be in February 2026. Now,
that is not bullish. That is the bull. That's the full horns.
for sure, that's pretty loose. Like if that happens, the train will have run away yet again. Like the average buyer will add probably more than $100,000 to their affordability. And if you told me that you wanted to buy a house, Jason, I was like, here's another check for $100,000. Treat yourself. You're not going to spend it.
He's like, oh, okay, I'll just keep that in my back pocket. Hell no.
And that actually,
when the right one presents itself, I'm using that check.
That then may be the trigger for the middle market to join the lower end and the higher end in terms of being quite progressive and moving forward. Because that will free up money for the same repayment. That will free up a lot of people to actually go and meet some expectations, right? Probably in the early days, fuel expectations still beyond where those prices are, but it will catch up to itself. Hare & Todd White, a real like national valuation firm, pretty highly regarded and highly respected. They do a sort of property clock market update every month. They've had Brisbane at approaching peak of market since December this month. So they're sort of early May based on April data's update. They've got Brisbane at peak of market. If we see a 0.5% cut, even if we see a 0.25% cut in May, I would expect that clock to go backwards and sort of keep it in approaching peak, because I don't necessarily think that an interest rate cut in Brisbane anyway does anything other than push prices forward. So
let's assume that there was going to be cuts, maybe not as many as 1.5% of cuts in the next, call it 7 or 8 months. Yeah. All it means is trajectory is we're on the up.
For sure. I would think that a conservative estimate of interest rate cuts to get interest rates to a level that are not cheap but not truly damaging to the economy either is probably half of 1.5%. So like whether it's a big cut or 3 sort of standard cuts, that would be our expectation. I think that's supported by the team at Holo.
And with that in mind, now's the time.
For sure. Like we would say
it's
this
coming.
Being buyers agents and like representing people buying real estate every day, but it is a good time to buy a house right now. Things will not get cheaper. Houses have never been worth more than they are today, and there's very likely chance that they will be worth more tomorrow. So if you have the emotional and financial capacity to go and buy a property and you can agree what you're willing to compromise on, it's not a shit time to buy a house. That's for sure.
Nice. As someone that spent my Saturday evening watching 3 games of rugby league, and I know that you were watching
4 channels of
election coverage.
Yep.
What does the re-election of Anthony Albanese and the Labor Party mean for real estate, for economy? What have you got for me?
Shout out to Albo for a resounding victory. New Labor MP in my electorate. I would think that it means business as usual. I think everybody thought that Labor would be returned. I don't think anyone really thought they'd be returned with the kind of majority that they have. That might be a license for them to kind of pull their fingers out and get on with a few things. Their housing policies are there just to light fire to a still rising real estate market, not just in Brisbane, but like Australia-wide. Do I think that solves the housing crisis? No. The only way to do that is to change zoning so you can build higher density houses in nicer parts of capital cities. And the old people who probably are really disgruntled with the election result won't let that happen. And it's also down to the councils. And the councils are all Liberal councils for the most part. So I don't see them changing too much too soon either. So I hope you can pull off some cool stuff, Albo and the Labor Party. But I also don't think that building 100,000 new houses 55 minutes west of Brisbane is really going to solve the affordability issue for people that want to live 15 Ks from the city.
Nice. Well, I'll be sure to tag him when I publish this week's podcast. And that is a snapshot of April into May and onwards. Brisbane winter is here.
Yep.
He's Sam. I'm Chase. Cue the song.